Hi, I'm Matt from Educraft.org. So today we're going to kind of wrap up the coding to our mod so we can release a 1.0 edition with just your items and blocks and materials, which is kind of the basics of what you'd want in your own mod. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use a bunch of recipes to unify your materials so that from the player's end it's going to seem like one thing. And I'm going to show you how to do that today. You're going to need to make a new item called the ingot for your material, and then from there it's really just going to be creating a ton of recipes. I hope you're excited because I'm enthused because I've been doing this a lot lately. But well, enough about my problems. Let's get to work. All right, first things first. So right now, just to get this out of the way, let's create a texture file for your materials ingot. Now, I've already done this, but you should be pretty familiar with this by now. You go to Pixlr, you create a 16 by 16 file, you make sure it's PNG, make sure it's transparent, and you build a block. So I'm going to skip that part. I'm just going to show you my ingot, and I'm going to put it in to my resources. So let's look at what that looks like on my screen. So I've got this PNG file that I created with Pixlr, which you know everything about by now and you're a pro at, and I saved it to my desktop as unobtainium underscore ingot. So you want to save it as your material name underscore ingot, because that's a pretty good name for a texture and an unlocalized variable. So I'm going to open up my resources and I'm going to find my textures and items, and I'm just going to drag it into here. I'm going to say, yeah, let's copy that file. Then I'm going to go to the models and item, and I'm going to do the thing we always do where I find the item name. I'm going to right click and copy it, and then right click and paste on the package, and I'm going to type item unub. So you're going to name this after what you will call your registry file, which generally begins with item and then the item name, no spaces or underscores. You just use capital letters to identify the beginning of words. Unobtainium ingot. You click OK, and you double click on that, and I'm going to give it the texture name, which I called unobtainium underscore ingot, all lowercase. Okay. For those of you who aren't blacksmiths, an ingot is really just a smelted piece of metal that is easy to transfer, and it's always the same weight, and so that you know what value you're getting for it. The medieval nerds like me, pay attention to stuff like that, especially if you play D&D. If you don't, it's just a weird Minecraft thing, and just accept it for that. But otherwise, it's a cool history lesson. All right. And so now we're going to actually go into our code, and we're going to create ourselves an item. Oh, you're going to be so good at this by now. So we start out with an item variable. It goes underneath the squiggly under mod items. I'm going to put it where I put my ingot for my material item. It's public static item, and then it's unobtainium underscore ingot. That's a good variable name, and coincidentally it's the same name as our texture name. All right, so for the init, I am not going to create a new class or anything. I am simply going to use this as a means of, so I'm going to type unobtainium underscore ingot equals new, and I'm just going to say, hey, it's an item, just like any other item, and I'm going to set unlocalized name. The string, it's the same. The unlocalized name is generally the same name as the texture, So I'm going to say, and the variable name, so I'm going to say unobtainium underscore ingot. Alright, I'm going to set registry name, and again this is a string in quotes, and in this case it's going to be the same as the JSON file name. So item with a capital I, unobtainium ingot. Alright, I am going to then give it a creative tab, set creative tab, and it's going into creative tabs dot, and it's a material, so I'm going to put it under materials, and I'm going to put a semicolon to end all of that. So you don't even have to create a class, because item has all the stuff you really need for that, and then when you are creating this variable and defining what this variable is, you just have to give it, you can from that very same line give it its unlocalized name, give it its registry name, and set the creative tab. But you still have to register render and put it in game register it. So game registry.register, I put the semicolon in already, unobtainium underscore ingot, and add it to the register render. So register render unobtainium underscore ingot. Alright, and so now we should have unobtainium ingots in the game that we can see and use. So next up, I'm going to close all this. I'm going to go to our recipes. That's actually in it. We're going to mod crafting. Okay, so we want to make it so that we get our ingots by smelting the block. So I'm going to go, so I have basically anything you put inside this register method is going to count as a recipe, and your game will accept it. I personally like to be a little organized, so I create little comments that organize the code, and you'll notice if you go down here I have smelting recipes and smelting blocks. So I want to be able to smelt an unobtainium block into an unobtainium ingot. So I'm going to type game registry capital G capital R dot add smelting, which it adds a smelting recipe. Okay, that was weird. Now we're going to start with the input. Unlike the other code where we start with the output, we're going to start with the input. So I'm going to type mod blocks capital M capital B, just like our name, and I'm going to go down to unobtainium ore. So if you put unobtainium ore into the smelter, I have what you get. Now we have to define this with item stacks, because in theory you could get more than one item, or the item might have a thing called metadata, where like if you get a dye out of it, the metadata determines what color dye it is. So when there's more to the item, and there's possibly more to the item than just what it is, when there's a quantity or metadata, generally you have to do it as an item stack. So new item stack, capital I, capital S, and I'm going to type mod items because that's a class that this ingot is in, and I'm going to type unobtainium underscore ingot. There we go. Next up is how much experience I get. It doesn't need to be much. It's a float, so it has to have a decimal, so I'm going to say 1.0 and F for float. So now if you smelt excuse me, sorry. Now if you smelt your unobtainium ore, you're going to get an unobtainium ingot. And now what you do is just use your unobtainium ingot as a recipe for your unobtainium armor and your unobtainium tools. So for tools, I have an unobtainium spade, so I'm going to really quickly make recipe for that. So it's going to be a shaped recipe, which means you're going to need a crafting bench for it. So I like to put it up here where I have my space reserved for creating recipes for a material tool under shaped recipes. And I'm going to type game registry.add shaped recipe. And in these, you actually start out with what you get, not what you put in. And so I'm going to start with a new items stack. And under mod items, I'm going to get an unobtainium spade. So mod items dot unobtainium underscore spade, not space, I always do that, unobtainium spade. Okay. And then after that, we do our parameters that we put in. I'm going to just put a semicolon just so I don't have to think about that anymore. All right, and remember how the parameters work. Each comment represents a row in the grid on your in your crafting table. So we have the top row of 3, the middle row of 3, and the bottom row of 3. And I'm going to just stick to this typical shovel recipe, which I believe is 2 sticks in the middle, on the bottom and the middle, and then the material item on the top. So I'm going to type I for ingot in the middle space, S for stick in the middle space, and S for stick in the middle space. Now, if you've done this right, there will only be 3 spaces within each quote, 1, 2, 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3 spaces. And now I have to tell the game what specifically each of these characters is. So I'm going to start with an apostrophe, not quotation marks, but an apostrophe for when it's a character. I'm going to type I, and then outside of the apostrophe, a comma. I'm going to say, hey, this is what I mean when I say I. And I mean this thing called mod items dot unobtainium underscore ingot. Okay, and I have another item, the stick. So, and again, apostrophe, not quotes, comma, and this is not a mod item. This is an item from the regular game. So I just have to type items dot stick. There we go. Items dot stick. Alright, so that's the recipe to craft my unobtainium spade. Now I'm not going to do this for all of the armor because you should be able to figure that out on your own. But I'm going to show you I'm going to show you how to make a helmet. We're going to make our unobtainium helmet. So up here I have a little space for armor. Again, it's going to be a shaped recipe, so it's an issue of remembering what a helmet recipe looks like. So I'm going to type game registry.add shaped recipe. The output is going to be an unobtainium helmet, so new item stack, and in that it's going to be mod items dot unobtainium underscore helmet. Perfect. Okay, and then the parameters. We have our quotes 1, 2, 3, quotes 1, 2, 3, quotes 1, 2, 3, and then we have our, in fact, I'm just going to go with I for ingot, so I'm going to put I's in, so I, and then it's going to be a mod items dot unobtainium ingot, and then don't forget the semicolon. And right now there's nothing in our recipe yet, so let's see, what's the helmet recipe? It's fill in the top row, the 2 edges, and the 2 edges of the second row. And if there's nothing in the 3rd row, we don't even need it there. So I'm going to delete the 3rd row. And the top row, I. And in this first space, I'm going to replace it with an I. The middle's empty, so I'm going to leave it blank, and then have an I. And so now I have a smelting recipe, so I can smelt my unobtainium ore into unobtainium ingots. And then I have tool recipes where I can take those ingots and I can actually make items and armor out of them. And so let's run the game and see if it works. Here we go. Boom. Alright, so I'm in this world. I've got it in survival mode, and I'm getting ready. I got my, oops, wrong thing. Game mode C. That was dumb. That's what I want, a crafting table. Alright. And I'm going to put the crafting table down. I'm going to put the furnace down. And first things first, I'm going to smelt this ore. So let's see what I get out of it. Heyo, I get my ingot. And this is boring, so I'm going to skip this for you. Okay, I think I've got enough for my recipes. So now I'm going to go to my workbench, And I'm going to first try to make the shovel, which I believe the recipe I made 2 sticks down the middle and this on top, and hey-oh, I made an unobtainium spade. Now I didn't create a texture for that because, again, I don't want to insult you by pretending that you need me to tell you how to do that again. So I'm just going to take it, and when you make your own spade out of your own material, I'll let you figure out how you're going to do the texture for it. And now I'm going to follow the helmet recipe, which I think looks something like this. And now I've made the unobtainium helmet. Okay, and the unobtainium helmet doesn't have a texture for when it's in my inventory, but it does have a texture, nice, for when it's on my head. I love it when a plan comes together. All right, so we're good to go. So there's only really one more thing to do until your mod's complete, and that's if you put your cursor over these items, you'll notice it doesn't really have a very pleasant looking name. So I'm going to show you how to make it so that the game has your items called things like chest instead of item.unobtainium_ingot.name or item dot or whatever dot whatever. All right, so we're going to work on that next time. Okay, so you basically have a functioning mod right now. It's just there's things we could pretty up. For one thing, if you're lacking in textures, it'll let you do your own textures with Pixlr or whatever image editing program you like, and editing your JSON files. So that's fine, you can take care of that. But the other cosmetic thing is the names of your items and blocks. And so what we're going to do next time is we're going to figure out how to affect a thing called your lang file so that the game calls things what you want the player to see them called, and not, it doesn't give them their unlocalized name surrounded by the kind of thing it is dot, that name, dot, name. So we're going to take care of that next time. Ooh, yeah.